Hey, quiet down, please. Stop talking, please. 10-4, solving quadratic equations. Problem number 1 will look like this. X squared minus 1 equals 0. So, first step, Aaron. Oh, you didn't know you were volunteering, did you? What's first step? Solving for x. I give you a hint. There you go. Add 1 to both sides. We end up with x squared equals 1. How do I undo an x squared? Raise your hand if you know. How do I undo an x squared? Preston. Neither. Anybody else? Paige? Did you know that, Shannon? Good job. I like to recognize those that have their hands up as well, right? So as soon as you take the square root of a number, you've got to have plus or minus. I'll explain why in a second, but for now, trust me, you have to have plus or minus. So we end up with x equals, what's the square root of 1? 1. So plus or minus 1. Okay, so if I were to do the check, most students will ask, why do you need the minus 1? Okay, then I plug this in. If I do 1 squared minus 1, I get 0. If I do negative 1 squared minus 1, right, negative 1 squared is positive 1, and it's still 1 minus 1, which is 0. Okay, so that's why you need the plus and minus. Always, always, always. If the problem's worth 5 and you forget the plus or minus, you miss 1 point. Okay? Both positive and negative 1. Because of the square, that's why you can have a negative, right?
Let's say we our final answer was like 295 and the x equals plus minus 229.
Indeed it would. I just explained right here.
That is so weird.
You weren't paying attention? Because if I square 1, what do I get? And 1 minus 1 is, if I square negative 1, what do I get? No. What's negative 1 times negative 1? And 1 minus 1, 0. That's right. Okay, because you're squaring it, you need to include that negative value as well.
Now, are we going to do a problem where instead of minus, we do plus?
Yes, we are. Indeed we are, young man. All right, so let's do x squared minus 16 equals 0. I'm kind of making it up a little bit. What's the first step, Evan? Did you hear me say what's the first step, Evan? I wasn't just awkwardly staring at you. I asked you a question. What's the first step, Evan? Yeah, say that one more time. I'm sorry. Plus 1 or plus? How do we get rid of negative 16? There you go. Just add 16 to both sides. So we get x squared equals 16. Raise your hand once you know the last step. Yeah. And as soon as you take square root of a number, you have to plus minus. Okay? So we get, what's the square root of 16? Good. All right, so two really simple examples, right? Only thing we're adding to what you've learned before is taking the square root at the end. No big deal. So now we're going to make it a little different.
So wait, you're just finding the square root and then you put plus and minus in front of it?
Yep.
3x squared minus 75
It's a nice Vanna voice right there. Although she never spoke. Yeah. 3x squared minus 75 equals 0. You'll get over it. That's okay. All right. So what's the first step, Anna? We want to get the x squared. Look up here. We want to get the x squared part by itself. So what do I have to get rid of? The negative 75. What's the opposite of negative 75? So we're going to add 75 to both sides. Okay, so we get 3, please be quiet. We get 3x squared equals 75. What's the next step? Jenna? Divide by 3. Gotta, exactly. Don't forget to get that x squared by itself. Okay, what's the last step, Preston? That's the step you wanted to say, right? Right. As soon as I take square root of a number, I have to put plus or minus. Okay. Not a whole lot. It's a pretty straightforward section. Let's do the very last section we covered. Do that one.
2x squared plus 4 equals 0.
Copley, what's the first step here? So we get 2x squared equals negative 4. Next step? Cassie?
Divide by 2.
So we get x squared equals negative 2. Anyone know what happens if you put a negative square root in your calculator? No? It's an error. It's an error. Because you cannot take the square root of a negative number until you get to algebra 2. Once you get to algebra 2, what we do is we start making up numbers. So when it's a square root, if we're doing square root of negative 2, that would be square root of 2 is 1.4. It's an irrational number, so it goes on forever. And then the negative 1 under there, we replace with the letter I, a cursive I. Imaginary numbers. Because if it's not hard enough, we just start making crap up. Right? All right. So second square root, negative 2, non-real answer because it's imaginary. It's kind of there, kind of not. The reason they did imaginary numbers is because it still gave mathematicians the ability to solve problems, because periodically throughout a problem you could end up with a negative square root, but you might end up squaring it and it goes away, so it's just a way for them to deal with negative square roots. So, if it's a non-real answer, what's the solution? No solution. Very good. You're on fire. Yeah.
So it's only no solution if it's a negative, so it's like x or whatever number squared equals a negative number.
Correct. Because if I should show that. Can't have square root of a negative number. Exactly. All right, let's do. Remember that's root?
I'm sorry. It's not your fault. It's just one time in classes.
Trust me, I'm not offended. But it is root. Just point it out. So what is it, example 5?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is another little layer of difficulty, but again, no real big deal. Victor, what's the first step here? So if we add 36 to both sides, we get 9x squared equals 36. put my phone on silent, huh? So, what's the next step? Tristan, I could feel you wanted to volunteer. Nope. I'll never call on somebody that goes, ew. Brittany? Divide by 9. Reminds you of Welcome Back, Carter, right? Rorschach? Isn't that who did that? Do you know what that show is? You should watch it. It's pretty funny. It's like 1970s high school class. So here's the trick. This is Preston. This is why you're in my class, because now you can learn. It's amazing. Because we divided by 9, and it's 36 over 9. It would be 4, but I want to show you the other trick, because it won't always work out that way. Okay? So if I take a square root here, and I take a square root here,
Oh, there's still plus minus?
yep, still plus minus. Then I get x squared equals 6 over 3, which is 2. So yes, you could have divided 36 by 9 here, then taken the square root of 4. Still got 2. But I just wanted to show you, this is a legal math move. You can square root both numerator and denominator. Okay, it works. And I want you to do it that way. Like if it were 25 and 9 here, then it wouldn't evenly divide out. Right? What? 6 divided by 3, thank you. Right, plus or minus. Again, if you forget plus or minus like I just did, minus 1. So I got my cell phone taken already this class period and minus 1. Oh well, that'll happen. What's 6 divided by 3? Example 6.
1/4 x squared.
I'd rather not.
Why do you make them so hard?
This is not.
It's easy, and then he does something to make it hard.
Exactly.
What's the first step? Brittany knows the first step.
Plus 1.
Okay. So we just get 1/4 x squared equals 1. And then how do we undo a fraction at the front? Multiply by the, or just, yes, but what were you going to say? Multiply by what? 2.5.
2.5. I already divided by 2.5 with,
0.25 is what you meant to say,
0.25,
right?
yeah.
Instead, we're going to multiply, what can we multiply it by instead of dividing? Because when you guys divide by a fraction, a lot of mistakes occur, and I want to try to prevent those mistakes. We already said multiply by the reciprocal. Multiply by, which is 4 over 1. So we can just multiply both sides by 4. So we get x squared equals 4. Last step, Preston. And don't forget the
Plus minus.
plus or minus, right? How many times have I said that today? Yeah. So x equals plus or minus dose. All right. So one more example. Everyone got that one down? Beta? It's just very abstract. It's not, well, I'm a bad person to ask how hard it is, I guess. Okay, let's look at this beast. Museum is planning.
Oh, no.
You love story problems.
No, we don't.
A museum is planning an exhibit that will contain a large globe. The surface area of the globe will be 315 feet squared. So just abbreviate, don't write this whole thing down. I'd write surface area 315 feet squared. Okay? We want to find the radius of the sphere producing this surface area. We're going to use the equation for surface area of a globe or surface area of a sphere, which is S equals 4 pi r squared, where S is the surface area and r is the radius. So the question is, where does the 315 go? S equals 315. So instead of the S, we're going to put in the 315. Robert, how do I get the r squared by itself? What do I have to divide by? More? Or what? Divide by 4 pi on both sides. But pi is more accurate, right? Because it's a decimal that goes on forever without repeating. So just all of your calculators have a pi button. Use it. Because your answer will be slightly different if you round pi to 3.14. You're just going to divide using the pi button. So we're going to do 315. So right here we would have, I'm just going to put the variable on the left. So what do I have to do to get the r squared by itself? Remy, what do I have to do to get the r squared by itself? Not so much. How do I undo a square? This is there you go. So now if I think about plus or minus, do I need plus minus one or the other or both? Who can tell me why we don't need the minus one?
Because there's no minuses.
Don't just guess.
Well, there is no minuses. So they have everything.
Yep.
You have negative surface area.
Yes, you can't have negative radius, right? No negative radius. You'd have to be in some sort of parallel dimension where everything was like negative instead of positive. Be really weird. So we just have the positive one here. So when you're dealing with distances, you can't have a negative distance, right? Even if I walk backwards, I'm still going in a positive distance, right?
No.
Oh yeah.
And going
It's
in
crazy,
positive,
right?
positive distance factor.
Right? Still distance, right? It's not negative distance. Right. Drive your car backwards on the highway, you're still gaining distance. Don't do that. All right. So we're going to put this whole thing in the calculator. When you put this whole thing in the calculator, you just have to put the 4 pi in parentheses, and I'll show you that now. So we'll go second square root, 315, divided by, in parentheses, 4 pi. And we get 5. What are the units here?
Pi. R speed.
What? Don't just guess stuff.
Oh, feet.
Feet, just feet. Right? When we talk about area, you need feet squared or whatever unit is squared. When we talk about volume, you need whatever units you have cubed. And when we talk about a straight line distance, like a radius, right? It's just from point to point, a radius. Then it's just whatever the unit is, feet, inches, centimeters, whatever. Okay? Your homework's up there on the board. 531, 1 through 22 all. Couple story problems at the end.